The next thing I want to do is to set up these obstacles for the player to go through, right? That's kind of the point of the game, is to go through as many of these obstacles as you can. And these obstacles, these pipes, are actually, if you play the game, you'll notice that they are set up in pairs, right? So there's always one at the top and one at the bottom, and the objective is to go through the middle part, the sort of open gap. So let's set that up. Actually, I'm going to use, instead of a cube, might be more fun if we do 2 cylinders. Right, so I'm going to position them at 0 again, just because I kind of like doing it that way, even though that's not quite convenient there. So I'm going to pull it up here. Okay, so the Y position has changed, but not the X and Z position, so that's good. I'm going to make this one longer, like really long. The reason, you'll see why in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to say this is the top pipe, top. Okay, and then I'm going to duplicate that, call that bottom. Okay, so let's see. Let's move that one down. Sort of leave a gap in between these two. All right, I'm not going to be super precise about how big the gap is right now. I think ideally the gap, you want the gap to be slightly bigger than the jump distance, but we can fine tune it later. Okay, and so we have our bottom pipe and the pipe at the top. Now let's group them together so we can manipulate them at the same time. Right. So the way we do this is by creating an empty game object. Right. Make sure it's another position is where you want it to be. I'm going to put the object somewhere here. It doesn't really matter, but let's move these two objects into this new game object. All right, this game object is an empty game object. I'm only using it for grouping these two cylinders together. All right. So the benefit of that is now whenever I move this object, they both move at the same time. Right. So I'm going to call this obstacle. Okay. Now in the game, these pipes keep moving towards the player. Actually, it moves from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen, and they continue coming. Right, that gives you the sense of moving forward. Right? And the way we're going to do this is by having another object somewhere over here, a obstacle generator that continues to instantiate these obstacles and then move them towards the left side of the screen. Right. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is let's click on the obstacle object, add a state machine, and again, this is personal preference. I always do this init, have an init state. Command click on the state to create a finished event, and also command click on an empty space to create another state, and then just do that. Right. Okay, I'm going to call this state move, and all I want to do is just move this thing to the left. So let's go to where is it now? Let me translate. Okay, here we go. Translate, and you notice that I'm not adding forces to this object because it's not a physics object, so we don't need to use force to move it. We're just going to translate the position of the object, right? So we're going to move this negatively on the x-axis. Right? The way you figure that out is by, you can just look at position and then you move it in the direction you want it to. Right? Okay, so where did it go? Here. Move state. On the y-axis, we're going to move. Let's just do -1 per second. And let's do a world space. Alright, so when let's click on play and see what happens. Right, so it's moving very slowly. So maybe we'll make that a little bit faster. Do -3. Let's preview this and see what happens. So that's okay. That's not a bad speed. Let's start with that. Okay. Okay, now we want a generator that continues to instantiate this obstacle object, this one. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is let's go to the project view and turn the obstacle into a prefab. Right. Okay, now you simply drag the object into the project view and then it turns into a prefab. And I'm going to delete this object in the scene. Okay. Next, let's create a generator. Let's just use a cube again. Rename it. And let's reset its X and Z axis. The reason why I want to make sure we do that is because I want everything to be on the same location so that they can make sure that they would collide with each other. Or they basically we just want to make sure the Z axis is consistent so we don't have to worry about it. Let's move make sure that the generator is out of the view, right? You don't want the player to see it. So I'm just going to move it somewhere over here. Okay, and let's go to the PlayerMaker editor and create a new state machine here. Now again, you don't have to do this. This is just something I started doing and I found it quite useful down the line. Right, so we're just going to do generate, yeah, that's how you spell it. And we're going to simply instantiate or create object. And the object we want to create is the obstacle prefab. Okay, and then we're going to, let's just start another state that says wait, because we want it to continuously create this object, but not every single frame. We want it to wait a little bit. So the easiest way to do this is by adding a wait state. So after you create a new object, have it go to the wait state, wait for, let's say, 0.3 second. And once it's waited for that period of time, let's go back to finish, and then from finish it goes back to generate, and then it generates the next obstacle. Right, okay, let's save and give this a test. So it's generating these objects, but not at the right location. I forgot to set the location for the object when we create it. Right, so here spawn point where you want the object to be created. Let's just drag the generator object into that field, so they're going to be created here. So give that a quick test. Hit play. Right, okay, you can see that the these obstacles are being generated at the right spot. But here is a couple things. First, they are too closely. They're being generated too quickly, so they're very close. So let's change that to 3 seconds. and see if that's a little bit better. That's maybe a bit too slow, so let's just do 1.5 seconds for now. I think that might be okay. Yeah, that's fine for now. Okay, and another thing we want to do is to actually move the pipe up and down a little bit, because in the game that's how they make it difficult, because you kind of have to react to where the gap is, right? You're trying to get through these gaps. So one way we can do this is in the obstacle prefab. Let's go to the obstacle prefab. When it's initiated, let's move it up and down a little bit, right? That's just when it's let me just drag this back into the scene so you can see it. So if we say when the game first starts, when this object is first created, let's move the position a little bit, right? So we want to set the Y position to something, right? We want it to move it a little bit. So here I'm going to say new Y position. So that's our variable, and I'm going to say okay. When this object is created, let's move it to the new Y position. Now before we move it, we want to set a number for the new Y position, and I'm simply going to do a random float. And obviously I'm going to do that before I set the position. And what do we want to do? What do we want the position to be? So let's say we want the gap to be as low as here, right? So that's the Y position. I'm going to give it the minimum. And let's move it up to around here, right? So that's the tallest, the highest point I want the Y position of the obstacle to be, right? Okay, so let's move it somewhat back to this place. So if we can delete that, save, and then play. Now you can see that every time when the obstacle is being generated, it's being the Y position of the object sorry, the Y position of the object is being randomized in between those two numbers that I've just said. So that's good. So we want to make sure that we don't have the scene full of these obstacles, since we're generating them every second or every second and a half, right? So we want to set a condition that when the position of the pipe is sort of out of the screen, we want to destroy them, right? So let's figure out what that number is, what that position might be. Let's start the game and let's just observe the very first one, right? So I think it's pretty safe when this thing is around -9 on the y-axis that we can destroy it, right? I think that's a pretty safe bet that it's going to be out of the screen. So let's go to Playmaker and find that prefab and go to the move state, right? So here we have the translate, which moves the object. Now I'm going to do a condition. I want to check the position of the object. Transform get position, right? So we got get position. We want to check the Y position of the object. Let's go to variables and create a new variable called current X position. Sorry, did I just say Y? I meant X. We wanted the X position. of the object, and let's assign that to the current X position. Do that every frame, and then let's check variable against -9, which is the position that we discovered that we want to be checking for. Right, so I'm just going to search for it. Float compare. Not here. Right, so if the current X position variable is less than -9, then we're going to do something about it. Right, make sure we check every frame. And I'm going to create a new state called destroy. And here we're just going to destroy self. And in the move state, let's create a finished state. So let's go back to the float compare. When current X position is smaller than -9, I'm going to finish, and that's going to go to destroy. Okay, save, and let's give that a test. Right, okay, you can see that the pipes are starting to disappear when it sort of hits that X position, so that's good.